be with you all this morning. For those of you that don't know me, we're from Central. My name is Fumi Tosu. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of Levin and an occasional preacher and occasional worshiper here at Salt and Light. It's nice to be with you. My nephew Yushi is 11 years old. He's kind, creative, very athletic. And a few days ago, his parents took him to Narita Airport in Tokyo, Japan. And they watched with teary eyes as their preteen son went through security and immigration on his way to visit his cousins in California alone. Now, Yushi took more than his sandals and walking stick. He had his 2 passports, his favorite stuffies, his Nintendo Switch, and crucially, flight attendants caring for him on the United Airlines Unaccompanied Minors program. And yet, in the pictures of him my brother sent from Narita, I could see in Yushi's expression excitement tinged with more than a little anxiety, a sense both of adventure and vulnerability. And I wonder how the disciples felt as they were sent out 2 by 2. Some comfort, certainly, that they were not alone. Maybe some excitement at the adventure, a sense of purpose, knowing that they were organizers, building a larger movement for justice. And at the same time, I imagine there was some anxiety too. Notice Jesus' instructions for the journey. Take a walking stick and sandals, but leave behind your bread, bag, and money. In other words, take along the means of travel, like your sandals and the walking stick, but leave behind the means of sustenance, bread, bag, money. And whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if a town does not welcome you, move on. These, I think, are instructions designed to increase the disciples' dependence on the hospitality of those they encounter. Take your shoes and walking sticks so you can get to where you're going. But once there, trust that the community will care for you. And if they don't offer you food, shelter, and welcome, move on, trusting that the next community will offer you hospitality. At Dandelion House, where I live and work, and in the Catholic worker movement of which we are a part, we often think of our work as the work of offering hospitality. And yet, in today's story, that's not at all what Jesus calls us to. Today, he calls us not to stay home so we can welcome others, but to leave, to venture out, to set out 2 by 2, depending only on the sustenance that others provide. And the question is, why? Why must we leave our homes and our places of belonging to wander and be dependent on others? Wouldn't it be better to stay home so we can welcome the millions who are forced out of their homes, not because of a calling, but because of violence and injustice? And certainly, hospitality is an important practice. Welcoming others is a Christian, and more than that, a human act. Mary and Martha of Bethany are prime biblical examples of hospitality to Jesus and to others in need. But I think there is a kind of leaving to which we are called, and the first part of today's story gives us a hint. In the first part of today's story, we're in Jesus' hometown of Nazareth, where the townspeople see nothing extraordinary in Jesus or his movement. In the previous chapter, he's just raised Jairus' daughter from the dead. And all they can say is, isn't this Jesus the carpenter? Isn't he Mary's son? Don't we know his brothers and sisters? There's a kind of complacency here that blinds them to the extraordinary inbreaking of the kingdom of God taking place in front of their very eyes, in the person of Jesus and the movement that he's inaugurated. And the complacency has real-world consequences. No miracles could be performed there, we're told. Nothing could happen there. Nothing new, nothing unexpected, nothing beyond the way things have always been. And it's in that context that Jesus sends his disciples out 2 by 2 with only the sandals on their feet and a walking stick. He knew how dangerous it was to the movement he was creating to be lulled into a sense of ordinariness, of nothing new can happen here, of we know everything there is to know and we can't imagine anything different. And so he says, go, leave, wander, be vulnerable, be dependent. Nothing new comes from complacency, but out there on the margins when we are most vulnerable, creativity flourishes. Salt and Light Lutheran Church. You all know about this. You left the structure called Redeemer Lutheran, ventured out with your sandals and walking sticks, unsure of what would come next, dependent on community, dependent on spirit, dependent on God. And out of that leaving, something extraordinary, Leaven, was born. And Central Lutheran Church, you too are learning this, and very abruptly at that. What a destabilizing time for you. I imagine there might be a wide range of emotions about worshiping with us these last few weeks. Anxiety, sadness, and anger might be among them, but perhaps also there's curiosity, wondering about future possibilities, and dare I say, excitement. The writer and lay theologian William Stringfellow wrote a seminal work called Christians and Other Aliens in a Strange Land. Christians and Other Aliens in a Strange Land. And according to Stringfellow, every country, every state, every principality must ultimately be a strange land for Christians, because every earthly principality is a place of systemic injustice and oppression. Our call is always to venture out and to create something new on the margins, something prophetic, beautiful, in resistance to the dominant paradigm. And I think that's also why we keep hearing in the Gospel of John that we are not of this world. We're not meant to be at home in capitalism. We're not meant to be at home in America or Japan or Mexico or Hungary. We're not meant to be at home in patriarchy. We're not meant to be at home in colonialism. Jesus knew that the familiar could become the enemy of the new world that he and we dream of. And so he calls us out of our complacency, out of our comfort zones, out of our sense of the familiar, and into the refreshingly new, extraordinary inbreaking of the kingdom of God. This is not just Jesus the carpenter, or Nancy, Kira's grandmother, or Doug the homeopath, Lois, Eric's daughter. And this is not just a joint congregation of the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, where nothing new can happen. This is the ever-new manifestation of the Spirit of God at work in our world. So go, leave behind what you know and expect. There is something new here. God is at work. And what could it mean for Salt and Light to leave what's familiar to you, and for Central to leave what's familiar to you, and for you to carry nothing for the journey, depending on the hospitality of those you encounter? Every moment of instability is an opening for the inbreaking of the kingdom of God. It's right here, within us and among us. We just have to believe in the miracle of its coming. 2 by 2, he sent them out, instructing them to take nothing but the sandals and their walking sticks. No bag, no money, no bread, no sustenance for the journey. The community is sustenance enough. The Spirit is sustenance enough. The movement you create will be sustenance enough. And now, as is our custom at Salt and Light, I'm going to invite you into what we call one-to-ones. And in a moment, when you break up into your pairs, the question that I'm offering, you can use it or not, is what's hard about leaving our places of comfort? And what's exciting about it? What's hard about leaving our places of comfort? And what's exciting about it?